This is a research overview about homework. It was used at Columbus School's CPC meeting in May of 2020, and we'll be reviewing it again this year as we approach assessment principles and beliefs for our whole school, because homework is a type of assessment. You can find the extended article that synthesizes a lot of what you'll see here in Educational Leadership. We're going to be looking at cases for homework, against homework, and some of the research that kind of lands in between or puts us on the fence. And in those cases, it really implies that we need to dig deeper, look at our context, and really look at the purpose for homework. So if you're a teacher that is listening to this video, you can ask yourself, do I use best practices around homework for students in my context? Contexts are different, so we may arrive at a conclusion that what's best in one context is not best in another. And for anyone watching this video, especially those of you in Curriculum Planning Committee, let's reflect on how might we align our school practices with what is known about homework from research. For all of the studies that I'll be referencing, notice that you can find them here if you'd like to dig deeper. So the first case says that what is best with homework tends to change over time. This has been something that people have been discussing for many, many years and was heavily researched over the last 30 years. You find that in the 1940s there were cases against homework, and that tended to be because many of the children were working at home or had a heavy task load related to household duties. There were cases in the 1950s where homework became important because the Cold War was happening, the space race was happening, and the idea was that homework could provide a competitive edge and get students ahead and able to compete in a worldwide market. In the 1980s, more cases against homework came out. Those were mainly around the idea of mental health and that it doesn't necessarily support learning and it could be taxing for students. And in the 2000s, those more cases came out that were for and against. And really where we've landed is that homework can be useful, but it really depends on the purpose of the homework and the quality of the homework that's given. Research done in 1989 and 2006 showed a positive correlation between homework and academic achievement. The idea behind this is that because homework tends to extend learning beyond just the school day and the time that students are in class, students are getting more exposure, and therefore their achievement goes up because it's simply more time focused on academics. A conclusion in another study done in the year 2000 is that homework is detrimental to well-being. There are two main points from this study. One is that it can be detrimental to well-being because it creates this competitive corporate-style culture that doesn't value the family space in the home as much as that work culture. And this has a comorbidity, which is that it can do harm to economically disadvantaged students because they often live in places where it may not be practical or functional for them to be doing homework at home. So although those two things might make sense, the authors also concluded and proposed that there should be no homework, but that the school day should possibly be extended. Another study in 2006 also found that homework can be detrimental to well-being. However, these authors had different conclusions about what should be done. So in this study, it was said that schools might be able to provide better training to teachers around homework and what makes homework valuable, and that overall teachers should reduce the amount of homework and avoid it altogether on holidays and breaks. Another bit of research from 2006 has some connections as well. This one implies that homework can be beneficial, but that students should be involved in deciding what that homework is, and that we should move the default from being that students have homework to that they don't have homework, although some things can be assigned. It also suggests that some of the things that we call homework should be shifted towards things that we normally do at home. You can see some examples on the slide, watching good TV shows, reading, doing things with the family, cooking, that those could now be considered homework. The next section has some important considerations about homework. These may show us some things that need to vary by division of the school and age, or things that we may need to do to engage other groups as we talk about homework. So the first research shows that the grade level is really important when you consider a homework policy. It shows that homework is less effective in the lower grade levels, although this author suggests that instead of canceling homework altogether in those lower grade levels, that maybe small amounts or different types of life skills or study skills based homework be given so that students can cultivate a positive attitude towards learning in school. 2 more studies make the case that the purpose of the homework is what is most important about it. So there are achievement gains found in some elementary grade levels as well as secondary grade levels. However, these authors collectively give some advice, and that is that in early grade levels, there should be skill reinforcement through homework. It should also be related to how much parents can realistically be involved. And then as you move up into upper elementary and 6th grade and beyond, it can actually be more academic. It can play a role in fostering improved achievement, and it can be related to, at the secondary level, improving standardized test scores and grades. Several more studies suggest that there's a sweet spot with how much time students spend on homework. So for 12th graders, they may do well with large amounts of homework, up to 2.5 hours per night, and even in junior high, up to 2 hours per night. But when you pass a certain point, those students no longer show achievement gains or some of the positive effects of homework if it's overdone. Good and Brophy also offer reminders that it's really important to remember that students are doing this work independently much of the time, so it needs to be realistic in both its length and its difficulty. And what is appropriate for a 4th grader may be different than what's appropriate for a high school student that plans on attending college. And 2 more important considerations related to the amount of time. Cooper states that there's a 10-minute rule, so you multiply the student's grade level by 10 minutes, and that can be the maximum amount of time spent. But another argument is that this isn't so much about time that a student spends. We know that students work at different speeds. It's really about how much they complete from their homework. Another study shows us the importance of parental involvement. This one's a bit counterintuitive because although we normally think parent involvement is a good thing, with homework it can be very stressful or threatening for the parents to be involved and actually have negative effects. So the way that we ask parents to be involved in homework should extend students' learning and put them in a place where they're asking their children questions about what they're learning, rather than trying to be a secondary teacher of skills and content. A further suggestion from several more authors state that parents should receive clear guidelines that spell out their role and their involvement in terms of homework help. And finally, research around feedback suggests that teachers do not need to grade or comment on every piece of homework that students do, but rather they can use it as an opportunity for practice with students, and that they can couple feedback, general feedback or specific feedback, with remediation for students and use it as a way to enhance their instruction, use it as a formative assessment. So in summary, if we want our homework to be impactful for students, we need to make sure that it is purposeful, that students have a high chance of being able to complete it independently, that parents are involved appropriately, and that we're not overdoing it with the quantity. So in revisiting the same questions that we started with, if you're a teacher, you can think about your own homework policy or your own practices and see if those align with best practices for students in your context. And if you're thinking about this with a lens of whole school policy or principles and beliefs, how can we align what we're asking teachers to do and what their practices are around homework with what is known from research?